Okay, this is section 10.9 on polar equations of conics. So since I'm not here today, I'm going to stop talking for a few minutes to give you time to copy all of this down, and then I'll come back and talk about it and explain what we're doing in this lesson. Okay, so in this section we are still in polar mode and still graphing polar equations, but in section 9 these are going to be conic sections. So these shapes and figures should be familiar from sections 1 through 4. When we graph these, we're going to see an ellipse, a circle, a parabola, hyperbola. If you're looking at the two equations here, you notice they're very similar. The only thing different is the cosine and the sine. And then we have some EP values in here. So E has to do with the eccentricity of the graph. And we talked about that before. That's kind of what determines if it's more circular or more elliptical, a little more squished. The P value is the distance between the focus and the directrix, if you remember that from parabolas and hyperbolas. So what determines what type of conic it is the E and the P value. So it is an ellipse when the E value is between 0 and 1. So it has to be a fraction between 0 and 1. In order for it to be a parabola, E has to equal 1 exactly. And for it to be a hyperbola, E has to be greater than 1. So what we're going to do is I'm going to remind you of the settings that we need to have set up in our calculator for polar mode. And if you haven't cleared your calculator from the day before, then you should be all set. But just as a reminder, I'm going to show you all the different settings that we changed for polar graphing. And then we're just going to do one example today because this is a pretty easy lesson. You're just putting the equations in your calculator and drawing the graphs. So, calculator settings. First thing, you're going to go to mode and make sure that you are in degree and polar mode. Then we're going to go to window, and from polar mode the day before we had negative 360, positive 360, and then I think our theta step was at 15. So if you want to leave it at those settings, that's fine. Or you can change it 0, 360 to 1. The theta step, the only difference is on this setting, when it's equal to 1, it's going to graph every 1 degree. So it may take a little longer to graph your equation. If it's at theta equals 15, it may go a little faster. So it's up to you if you want to set it at 1. If it's going too slow, change it to 15. Okay, then you want to go to your table set, and those should be the same as the day before. So your table start should be 0, and you want your change in table to be 15. We want our table to go up every 15 degrees so that we're not seeing every single degree listed out. Okay, so we're going to look at our one example for this section. So R equals 2 over 1 minus cosine theta. So when you go to y equals, we're going to type in this equation. Remember, anytime there's more than one thing in the top or bottom of a fraction, you want to put it all in parentheses. So for this problem, I would type 2 divided by parenthesis 1 minus cosine theta, close parenthesis. I would put the whole bottom in parentheses. Okay, then you can go to your table and get some values. And remember, in your table, it's going to be theta comma r. So you go to the angle and out that many circles. And remember, that's the same thing when we first started graphing in polar. They had it r comma theta. It doesn't matter the order that you go in. You're going to get to the same spot. So when I go to my table, I get these values, and remember to pick values that are all the way around the circle. We don't want to pick just angles from quadrant 1. That's not going to give us a complete picture. And when I go to my graph, I can see my picture, see what it's supposed to look like. So part of this section is not only being able to put it in your calculator correctly and graph it, plot some points and graph, but be able to identify what type of conic section it is. So this kind of goes back to sections 10.1 through 10.4. Do you know what this shape is? So this is obviously a parabola. So your homework for this section is very short because you're just plugging these into the calculator and graphing them and writing the name. So you've got the rest of class to work on this homework, which should be plenty of time to finish it as long as you're working. If you don't finish it by the end of class, then you need to do it for homework. It will be due the first of class on Monday. Monday we're going to be doing an extra practice worksheet because we're going to be taking a quiz at the beginning of next week sometime over sections 6 through 9, the second half of this chapter, which has been on parametric equations and polar equations. And then at the end of next week, next Friday, we'll be taking a Chapter 10 test. So everything from Chapter 10 will be on that test. And we don't have time for any redos this time around. So this will be the test next Friday. So if you've been missing out on something and you're still confused, you need to go back and watch the lesson videos and figure out what's going on before next Friday.